My son-in-law submitted a loan application using my house as collateral, and nobody told me about it. The first I knew was a Tuesday afternoon in early March when I opened a white envelope from First Southern Community Bank, addressed to property owner, 114 Ashwood Drive, Marietta, Georgia. It was a standard adverse action disclosure, the kind banks mail to a property address as a matter of regulatory requirement, because the person living in a house has a legal right to know when that house has been pledged as security for someone else's debt. I sat down on the arm of my living room chair and read it twice. Then I put it in the drawer under the landline phone, right next to the takeout menus and a grocery receipt from December. I made a cup of tea. I stood at the kitchen window and looked at my late husband Harold's workshop in the backyard, which hasn't had the lights on since 2015, and I thought very carefully about what I was going to do next. I want to tell you the whole story. The end is not a surprise if you know where I spent my career, but the end will mean something different if you understand what the beginning cost. My name is Eugenia Whitmore. I go by Jeannie. I'm 67 years old, and I have lived at 114 Ashwood Drive in Marietta since August of 1981, when Harold and I bought it for $58,000, and the seller's agent told us the neighborhood was a stretch for us. She was right. We ate a lot of pasta that first winter. Harold taught shop class at Lassiter High School and built furniture on the weekends. He put a workshop in the backyard the second summer, a 14 by 20 cedar shed with a workbench, a pegboard, and a window that faces east, so he could start early without waking me. There are still pencil marks on the doorframe from the last project he measured. I have not painted over them. I don't intend to. Harold died on February 9, 2015. Pancreatic cancer, 4 months from diagnosis to the end. He was 64. My daughter Felicity is 41. She has her father's patience and her own judgment, and she loves her husband, which is not a character flaw, but has made certain things complicated. Her husband's name is Conrad. He's 44. He has a handshake like a mortgage broker and a way of explaining financial matters to me as though I've never handled money in my life. He owns 2 Sunrise Grill franchise locations in Cobb County. Or, he did, until the pandemic hollowed out the lunch traffic and the rent increases finished the job. In January, Conrad came over on a Sunday morning with a folder. He set it on my kitchen table the way people set things on tables when they've already decided the answer. Face up, angled just so, giving it a little slide forward like a gift I should be grateful to receive. Business loan, he said. SBA backed. The house would be collateral, just to get through this rough stretch. The restaurant was going to turn around. He'd done the projections. He needed $175,000, and the house would more than cover it. He said all of this while looking at the folder. I asked him whether he'd talked to Felicity before he talked to me. He looked up. Of course, he said. We've been discussing this for weeks. We're on the same page. We, that word again, the pronoun that makes a decision sound like it already belongs to you. I said no. I said it once, kindly. And I told him the truth, that I didn't borrow against property I planned to live in for the rest of my life, and that I wasn't in a position to absorb the risk of a business operating in the red for 3 years. That was accurate. It was also a very clean sentence to deliver to someone braced for a fight who got a closed door instead. He nodded. He picked up the folder. He said he understood. He didn't. Here is what I did not tell Conrad that morning, and what I need you to understand before we go any further, because it matters the way quiet things always matter later. For 31 years, I worked as a senior paralegal at Hendricks & Foss, a real estate closing firm in downtown Atlanta. I started as a file clerk in 1984. I moved up. By 1997, I was drafting closing statements, reviewing title commitments, and flagging exceptions that attorneys walked past because they trusted me to catch them. I have read more title insurance commitments than most licensed agents see in a career. I know what a Schedule B exception means. I know what a recorded instrument does to a chain of title. I retired in 2015, 2 weeks after Harold died, because there was no point in going to an office anymore. When people ask what I did for a living, I say I worked in law. That's true. What I don't add is the specifics, because the moment you say real estate paralegal, most people's eyes go somewhere else. Conrad, at a cookout 2 summers ago, told his neighbor that I used to do filing at a law office downtown. He believed it. He was standing 6 feet from me when he said it. I heard him and said nothing. I have thought about that choice since. You cannot take something from someone you've been listening to. Here is the other thing I did not tell Conrad that Sunday. In the spring of 2012, I had a hip replacement scheduled. Felicity was living here then, between apartments. I signed a durable power of attorney naming her as my attorney-in-fact. Just in case something went wrong under anesthesia, just in case she needed to handle something while I was recovering. It was recorded with the Cobb County Clerk of Courts because you record a POA when it might touch real property. That's standard practice. Felicity knew exactly what it was and why it existed. Conrad found out about it in 2020. I don't know exactly when. What I know is that in August of that year, I received a call from a loan officer at a credit union in Kennesaw thanking me for my recent application and letting me know my home equity line of credit request for $90,000 could not be processed at this time. I had not applied for anything. When I asked, she mentioned that the title search had returned an issue and underwriting had declined to proceed. I thanked her. I hung up. Then I drove to the Cobb County courthouse on Cherokee Street, took a number, and pulled the grantor-grantee index under my name. The 2012 POA was there. Sitting 3 entries above it, filed just days before that phone call, was a loan application authorization, bearing Felicity's signature as attorney-in-fact. The credit union's title search had caught something already on the record, something their processor flagged before anyone asked me a single question. What exactly? I don't know. What I did next, I know precisely. I paid $7 for certified copies. I went home. I drafted a revocation of power of attorney, 3 paragraphs, clean and specific, and I paid to have it recorded. Document number, date, timestamp. It revoked the 2012 instrument in its entirety and stated that any person dealing with the property was on notice. Then I mailed a copy to Conrad by certified mail. Return receipt requested. The green card came back 9 days later signed in Felicity's handwriting. She has a wide looping capital F with a small heart dotted over the I. I recognized it immediately. I never raised it with her directly. I made a choice. She was in a hard place that fall, and I wasn't certain she knew the full scope of what Conrad had attempted. The green card went into a manila envelope in the hall closet. I thought it might matter later. That was 4 years before Conrad came to my kitchen table with his folder. I want to tell you why I didn't pick up the phone the morning that bank disclosure arrived and call this whole thing to a halt. There are 2 reasons, and they are different sizes. The practical reason has a name. Barbara O.C. She's a 57-year-old elder law attorney on Powers Ferry Road who charges by the 6-minute increment and does not waste words. I called her in January after I'd said no to Conrad and before I understood that no wasn't going to stop anything. I told her everything. She listened. Then she said something I've repeated to myself probably 200 times since. "Jeannie," she said, "if you fight him in your kitchen, you lose. Not because you're wrong, because the kitchen is his room. Every reaction you have in that room becomes a data point about your mental state. You're a widow, you're over 65, and you've told him no. Now you need to wait for a room where what you say doesn't matter. Where the only thing that matters is what's written down." I told her I knew exactly what room that was. She said, "I thought you might." The other reason is harder to say. I was waiting for my daughter to call me. Not Conrad, Felicity. I was waiting for her to say, "Mom, I found out what he tried. I'm sorry. We're fixing it." That's all I needed. One phone call. And every morning from January to April, I woke up and thought, today might be the day. It was not strategy. It was hope, which is slower and worse at math than strategy, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. My daughter didn't call, but Piper did. Piper is my granddaughter. She's 22. She's finishing her nursing degree at Kennesaw State. She works double shifts at a hospital in Smyrna and still drives over on Tuesday mornings with 2 coffees. She's the only person in my family who looks directly at a thing and then says something honest about what she sees. She called me on a Thursday in February. She'd seen something on her parents' bank portal. She'd been added to an account years ago to help with automatic transfers, and she'd noticed a transaction that didn't look right. She didn't tell me what it was. She asked me a question. "Grandma," she said, "is something going on with your house?" I told her yes. She was quiet for about 4 seconds. Then she said, "What do you need me to do?" I said nothing yet. I told her the same thing I meant. If she made a scene, sent emails, called her father out, this would become a story about a family argument, and every person in that room would pick the version of me that was easiest to believe about a 67-year-old widow. She said, "So you're just going to let them?" I said I was going to let them get all the way to the end. She looked at me across the table. We were sitting on my back porch, Harold's workshop just visible over her shoulder, and she said, "Okay, but I'm bringing you coffee every week until this is over." She did, every single Tuesday. I went back to the courthouse on a Wednesday morning, 3 weeks before the closing date. Same window, same process, pulled my name in the index. The 2012 POA was still there. My revocation was still there above it. Recorded August 14, 2020, document number 2020 CR 184407. I paid for 2 certified copies and had them stamped with the raised seal. The clerk didn't ask me a question. She showed me the terminal. I searched my name. She printed what I found. $9, a parking space on Cherokee Street. That was the entire barrier to entry. I read both documents standing at the counter, under my breath, because I needed to hear them in a room. The revocation is 3 paragraphs. It says that the durable power of attorney I executed in 2012, naming my daughter as attorney in fact, is revoked in its entirety. It says any person dealing with the property is on notice. It has been public record for 4 years, indexed under my name, indexed under Felicity's name, available to anyone willing to type either one into a county terminal. Conrad had submitted his loan application with the 2012 POA attached. He had initialed the attestation clause. The line requiring the attorney in fact to certify the POA was in full force and had not been revoked. Felicity signed it because Conrad told her to, and because she believed the 2012 document was still valid. She hadn't searched her own name. She'd signed a certification she didn't know was false. I put the certified copies in my purse, folded in thirds with the raised seal facing in. I drove home on surface streets, past the Lassiter campus where Harold used to park in the side lot before his morning classes. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table. I took out Harold's old red mechanical pencil, a Stedler, the kind that takes 0.7 lead, the one he used for his shop diagrams, and on the back of a utility bill, I wrote 3 things. The loan file number from the disclosure form, the closing date, the name of the bank, 31 years of muscle memory. You write down the file number first. Then I put the pencil back and did not touch any of it again until the morning of the closing. Conrad called me the week before. He was warm the way people are warm when they believe they've already gotten what they want. He said the closing was April 18th, a Thursday, at 10 in the morning. He said he'd swing by afterward because he needed my garage code to retrieve Harold's old riding mower. He'd offered it to a neighbor. He said Felicity sent her love. He did not mention that my daughter had signed an attestation on a document she had no current authority to execute. I said okay. I said see you Thursday. That night, I ironed my gray blouse, the one I wore to Harold's service. I set out my good shoes. I put my license in the outside pocket of my purse so I wouldn't be fumbling at a table full of people who thought I was there to sign and smile. If you've ever ironed a blouse for a room where you already know the outcome and nobody else does, you know exactly what I was doing at that ironing board. First Southern Community Bank's loan closing office is on the 2nd floor of a building on Franklin Road in Marietta, above a State Farm office. The conference room has a laminate table, a bowl of wrapped hard candy in the center, and a whiteboard with 4 closing use only taped to the frame. I got there at 9:44. I sat at the far end of the table with my purse in my lap. Conrad and Felicity came in at 9:58. He had a portfolio, she had a tote bag, and she didn't look at me when she sat down, which told me everything. She knew more than Conrad thought she did and less than she should have. The loan officer, Priya Suresh, mid-30s, organized, reading glasses on a beaded chain, came in with a rolling cart and a stack of documents 4 inches thick. She introduced herself, thanked everyone for coming, and said she was waiting on one more member of her team before they started. Conrad reached for a pen anyway. "Let's get this done," he said. Priya said she'd need just another minute. A door opened. A man came in I had never seen before. 50s, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, a printout with a yellow flag on page 3. He introduced himself. Dwight Carver, title examiner, with their underwriting partner. He apologized for the short notice. He pulled out a chair and laid the printout on the table. "I'm going to walk through the chain of title," he said. "It goes faster if I start at the beginning." He read it the way someone reads a grocery list. No theater, no hesitation. August 1981, warranty deed, Harold James Whitmore and Eugenia Ann Whitmore, husband and wife, joint tenants with right of survivorship. That's the purchase. Refinance 1999, reconveyed 2008. Deed of distribution 2015, transferring Harold's interest to Eugenia per affidavit of surviving joint tenant. Standard. Fine. Then he turned to the page with the yellow flag. "The 2012 power of attorney," he said. "Recorded with Cobb County." He read the granting clause. Conrad nodded once. "That's the one," he said. "That's Felicity's authority to sign as attorney-in-fact." Dwight said, "Right, and there's a subsequent instrument." He put his finger on the line. Document 2020, CR 184407. Recorded August 14, 2020. Conrad said, "What instrument?" "Revocation of power of attorney," Dwight said. 3 paragraphs. Revokes the 2012 instrument in its entirety. States that any person dealing with the property is on notice. His voice was careful and without judgment. The attestation clause on the loan application required the attorney-in-fact to certify the power of attorney was in full force and not revoked. As of August 2020, it was not in force. Conrad didn't speak for about 3 seconds. Then he said there had been a mistake. Then he looked at me. He used the word he used when he wanted something. "Mom," he said, "what is this? Did you do this?" "I didn't do anything on April 18th. I did it on a Wednesday in August of 2020 at the Cobb County courthouse, and I mailed him a copy, and the green card came back with my daughter's handwriting in the signature box." I opened my purse. I set the certified copy of the revocation on the table, raised seal, date stamp, 3 paragraphs, and I slid it toward the center. Then I set the green card beside it, the certified mail receipt, his name on the envelope, Felicity's signature in the delivery box. Felicity made a sound I hadn't heard from her since she was 9 years old and broke her arm at a school carnival. It wasn't quite a word. Conrad stood up fast enough that his chair rolled back and hit the wall. He said, "This is not. You can't." He started 3 sentences and didn't finish any of them. He said Felicity didn't know about the revocation. He said the 2012 document was valid when she signed the attestation. He said someone should have told them. Dwight said, "The recording was public notice, sir." Priya said, very quietly, "I need to advise everyone that we can't proceed with this closing." I said 5 words. I said, "I revoked it 4 years ago." That was all I needed to say. The document said the rest. That is the only thing about a public record that has ever made me feel genuinely safe. It doesn't need a voice. It needs to exist and to have been put in the right place, and to be read out loud by someone whose job requires them to read it. The rest of the meeting was about 12 minutes, and all of it was administrative. In the parking lot, Conrad caught up with me at my car. He said I had set them up. He said I let them go through all of this on purpose. He said, "Do you understand what this does to us?" I said, "Conrad, I told you no in January." He said, "This is going to hurt Felicity." I said, Felicity signed an attestation she didn't verify. I didn't cause that. He said something else I'm not going to repeat here, and then he walked to his car. I sat in mine for a few minutes before I could get the key in. Here's what happened in the months after. The loan application was denied, and the SBA file was closed. Conrad's second Sunrise Grill location closed in June when the lease ran out and the numbers didn't support renewal. He's down to one location now. I don't know the current state of their finances, and I don't ask. Felicity and I had one real conversation about it 6 weeks later on my back porch. She brought coffee. She sat for a while before she said anything. Then she said, "Why didn't you tell me about the revocation when you recorded it?" I said, "Because in 2020, I wasn't sure what you knew, and I didn't want to force you to choose a side while you were already in a hard place." She said, "You should have told me anyway." I said, "You're right." And we sat with that for a while. Which is, I think, the most honest either of us has been with the other in several years. Barbara sent Conrad a letter in May, 2 pages, citing Georgia Code Title 30, which covers exploitation of elder persons and stating that any future use of my name, my property, or any instrument bearing my signature in any financial transaction without my direct and current written consent would be treated accordingly. I don't know if he read past the first paragraph. The letter exists, which is the only part that matters. I recorded a declaration of homestead with Cobb County in June. I executed a new power of attorney, naming Piper as my attorney in fact. I changed the garage code, and I did not touch Conrad's legal standing in any direction, because that was never the point. Piper comes by on Tuesdays. She still brings 2 coffees. She leaves for her clinical rotations before 6 in the morning, and sometimes when I'm up early, I hear her car start in the driveway, and it sounds like someone leaving in a direction they chose. At an hour they decided, towards something that's theirs. Harold's workshop still has the pencil marks on the doorframe. The last measurement he made was for a blanket chest he was building for Felicity's birthday. He got as far as the rough cuts. The pieces are still stacked against the south wall in order the way he always did it. I go in there on Saturday mornings sometimes. I don't build anything. I just sit in the east light with my coffee and let the silence be what it is. My house, my workshop, my record. Go find out what yours says while you still have the choosing of it.